I'm Flux of fluxwithit.com and the producers hang out and all kinds of other stuff. And I'm a synth nerd. And I'm here with Mads Lindgren, and he is a synth nerd and a tank console nerd and all sorts of audio destruction happening. And why don't you tell them what your current title is, what you do, and all that good stuff.
All right. Well, first off, I do all kinds of music. I don't really believe in style as a genre, so I try to cover as much ground as I can. I mean, wise man once said that the body needs all kinds of vitamins, and that's what I try to do in terms of music as well. Like to just do whatever comes out. And yeah, I have a release out on Ad Nauseam, which is like the second full-length CD, which is also the embodiment of this versatility where you would find, I don't know, hip-hop, ambient, breakcore, and the only thing that is kind of down center front line is really, really heavy bass lines and a lot of field recordings, basically. So that's, I guess, the only thing tying it together. And yeah, also a bit of the arsenal that you see here behind me. It's also influencing the sound in that sense. So I'm not really sure if that's some sort of introduction or maybe just an anchor of what I do, you know.
So, but this past summer, you did some shows. Let me just ask you what the scene has been like at the shows that you've been doing.
Oh man, I think this summer has definitely by far been the most busy in terms of playing shows and also the size of the shows. Like there was a lot of festival gigs going down. Like there was a France tour happening in when was it, April, with like 4 concert dates ending in Leipzig in Germany. And yeah, basically it was overwhelming, like going out and playing alongside some of these bass titans that I've been looking up to for quite some time, like Dean Rudell and Gortek and DJ Hidden, a lot of other guys, like really heavy hitters on the scene for sure. And yeah, basically people have been tearing their faces off at the shows, and the feedback has been overwhelming. Like, and I think the highlight of the summer would be the Fusion Festival in Germany, where you have like 60,000 people going out to an old Russian airstrip, where I got to play in one of the hangars from 4:30 to 6 in the morning. So basically rising the sun with these ravers, and that was by far the most amazing experience ever. Like standing in front of that and playing that kind of music on a festival rig. Like whenever I play live, it's not so versatile. It's very much motherfuckers, you know, like really hard hitting drum and bass or some other subversive sub bass music. So that has been really, really amazing in summer. And yeah, now things are actually quieting down a bit, which fits me perfectly. So I can go into production mode, and a lot of the stuff that I've been testing out on the stages, basically bass lines, drums, pads, whatever, are now coming together on a few new studio albums and a few new EP projects that I'm working on currently.
So would you say that doing the shows on such large rigs has affected the sounds that you're choosing for the album now?
I think like coming back, you know, when you're in a club environment, people have a certain expectation towards you. Like people go to a club or to a festival to have a good time and have a party. So if you start doing, I don't know, Italy disco or ambient, people are probably going to frown at you at that. So in that sense, I've been respecting what people would want of a live show, and in that sense also been playing quite heavy music live. So yes, it affects me in the sense that I get to test some sounds when I'm out playing live, but when I'm in my studio, this is really my oasis of freedom where I don't really feel tied down to any sort of style or genre. So, I mean, as always, like I liberate myself from genres or expectations in that sense, and I'm really happy being on Ad Nauseam in that sense, because he's been very supportive of this versatile way of, you know, living and producing, that you get to do whatever you want, you know, basically.
So some of the sounds that you've been creating in the studio for the Monolog records, are you noticing that maybe some of the rigs can't handle the sound, or like basically what I'm getting at is I've heard a lot of the music, and a lot of it is just so intense that I wonder, you know, usually when you're doing these gigs, you're not at liberty to choose the fidelity quality of the PA and whatnot. So I was just wondering, are you finding that you have to kind of tailor back your sounds when you're playing it all, or is it working out pretty well? Or
yes and no. Like what I have been noticing is that when you have a festival PA system or like a subland rig where you have like 4,500 watt subwoofers and 4 of them, then your nostrils start moving and you get like organ massage and your eyeballs are actually hopping so much that you can't read your screen anymore. So in that sense, yes, I do feel the pressure and reap the harvest or enjoy what I'm doing in the studio, just scale up in that sense. So yeah, I had a really good experience, like having a good friend Dean Rodell coming over and helping me actually adjusting the live set to actually work really well in terms of low cutting, high cutting, side chaining, getting the dynamics right, so everything is kind of breathing with each other. And he was also on the Friends tour and noticed a few things where he just came by one day and we did a few tweaks, and all of a sudden it started to blend a lot better and it became a little more powerful and it became a little more heavy and my eyeballs started hopping a little bit more, these kind of things. You really quickly find out a few tweaks, like how to really tweak your live set to actually deliver the pressure that you want to do. So
the live sets, what's your main rig setup like?
It's very, very minimal because there's a lot of like flying involved in this, and I can't really bring a full modular rig, so it's basically just a laptop and a machine controller and a very small Fader Fox MIDI controller. Mm-hmm. And then I'm firing off some MIDI clips and audio clips using Machine in live mode, and then Machine is caretaking all the drums where I kind of have a few building blocks that I know fit really well together, and I always like take pride and honor in actually playing a live set that it never sounds the same. So I try to improvise and have the ability to tune the bass into how it works with the pads. I can tune the drums to work in so the snare will work with the pads and these kind of things. So it's still very much live and improvised, although it sounds a little more compact or together these day and age. Like the first couple of live shows I played in Berlin were sounding fucking horrible, man. I mean, it was just, pitches flying left and right and bass totally out of control. But after doing it for some years, you actually find out how you can improvise and what kind of building blocks you can make available for yourself to actually improvise a really good live set in that sense. And also have a tempo control, like not all people are digging on the 175 BPM. Okay, well, fine, then you drop it to 140 and take it from there, like when you have MIDI files and you're not confined by audio sounding weird, dropping it in tempo, you have artifacts when you start stretching audio. You don't have that. If you have MIDI clips going to a synthesizer, then it's going to sound good at any tempo, and that's the same thing for Machine. And the reason why I'm using Machine Live is also because I have drum one-shots that will sound the same at any tempo. So in that sense, I have the freedom to go anywhere in the live sets, and that's really what I've been.
So most of the loops would be like Ableton, and then the one-shots you would be doing on Machine, or?
There's not really any audio loops. There's basically some MIDI files going to a massive sitting inside Machine. So I have the 8 massive macros sitting on the 8 parameters on the Machine control. And then I have, some patterns in Machine where I have, I think, 7 different groups doing drums. And on each sound, there's like a sliced kit. So I have maybe, I don't know, about 6,000 sounds in one Machine instance, and then I have slice kits on each sound, and then I can blend in the patterns in between each other, like pattern A from group A into pattern B from group D or whatever, like that. Then you start to improvise it, or beat jogging, like that. Then it flows really nicely.
Oh, okay. So yeah, and you're just, but you're using Ableton as the main host.
Yeah, Ableton is like the mothership, and then there's a Machine VST instance sitting inside of that, and then there's a massive sitting inside Machine. So there's like 3 layers of that, basically.
Have you had any oh shit moments? on tour?
Always. I mean, the thing is, like, honestly, I don't think it would be any fun if it was always going well and if there wasn't any challenge. I mean, you go on stage and you press play and your show is always the same and you're home safe and everything is safe, then I'm not having any fun. You know, I need to challenge myself also as a musician and also in a live moment, and I need to be able to move the music all according to how the people are reacting on it. You know, I want to drive people over that edge, and I need the capability to actually either take the energy up or down when I'm playing live. So yeah.
Now you've had opportunities that a lot of other people haven't really had, as far as getting to know software much deeper than a lot of other people. Doing QA with Native Instruments and working with Ableton.
Sure.
Do you find that is a major factor in how you're able to run live and be able to take on those sorts of challenges without being, scared to just be a press play guy?
I think it's a really good symbiosis that you get to know the technical insights of whatever you like to use in the day job, and then you can dance around the mines and the minefield and still get through without shit blowing up in your face. I mean, in that sense, yes, it's an advantage knowing all the bugs, But on the other side, I would do that anyway, man. I mean, if I was bringing out a Roland sequencer and an Akai sampler, I would also know the do's and the don'ts. I mean, as a musician, you look into the corners of your gear and then you find out where you can go with it. Like it's exploit upon exploit without getting into the trouble zones.
So, what would you say is your biggest hurdle when you're doing these shows?
Staying sober until I have to play.
Well played, sir.
No, seriously. I mean, when you go out, like mostly we play at shit o'clock in the morning. Like the drum and bass scene is very much from, I don't know, like the Fusion Festival was from 4:30 in the morning until 6, and I'm not new anymore, I'm kind of old, so yeah, it's a lot of coffee and it's a lot of Coca-Cola, like trying to stay awake for those gigs from time to time. But apart from that, it's just pure enjoyment, man. I really do enjoy playing these live shows.
Do you find that the interest in playing live and being around a culture of other people who are performing on stage, like, do you feed off of that energy to kind of keep you up and moving?
Definitely, man. I would say that for instance, this Subland as a place here in Berlin has definitely been a cradle for creativity where people connect, and another layer of symbiosis where people kind of improve what they want. Like there's not any of this cockfighting or scene battles of fighting for scraps or this kind of thing. It's been very, very supportive in that sense. So yeah, it's been escalating things and not really putting you down or anything like that. So yeah, it's a huge advantage, like having a community around you, like be it common interest in music or common interest in certain types of gear, whatever, man. I mean, there's always some advice or inspiration coming out of these encounters, man, for sure.
Subland is a pretty unique place. I've been kind of following when they were getting built up, and I think they had some challenges along the way too.
Definitely, man. I mean, it's in Berlin, doing like corner case music style, drum and bass, breakcore, industrial, and drone is not an easy task, and then still filling a club. So yeah, it's been pretty impressive to see this thing rise up, man, for sure. Very proud of that.
So have you noticed in the surrounding area, has, with Subland being such a well done spot, have you noticed it kind of bolstering the community around it?
There's certainly been like more things going on, but I mean, Berlin is so big that I can't really say anything about the scene as a whole. And I mean, I've been here, I don't know, since 2004, so almost 10 years. But I haven't really noticed any big fluctuations in that sense. I mean, it's still a very special city when it comes to these kind of things, that there's a breakcore party for people with blue shoes and there's a breakcore party for people with red shoes, and they don't really intertwine and really meet because you have so many niche scenes and so many people that are into the music. It's just crazy,
So with the more recent music that you've been making and touring with, have you found that certain aspects of your set are working better at different times? At night or later on in the set. Have you been having to tweak your set much in that way,
Sure.
or are you kind of just running through it?
Sure, man. That's why I've been keeping it open for changes and building blocks, because I used to spin drum and bass like back in the vinyl days, start of 2000. And the first thing you learn as a DJ is start reading the people that are actually in front of the speakers that are having a party and trying to have a good time to this terror sound that you're running, So all depending on how people react, then I'll try to take it in some sort of direction, like, okay, you get a little break, or okay, now you chilled well enough, now I'm gonna give you the flamethrower again. So yeah, that's the whole point of trying to keep it as open as possible, is that you're able to change it all depending on what people want or what people are doing, but still within a niche framework that it's not gonna be country music all of a sudden, I promise you, man.
So has there been anything recently that's been exciting you, as far as like music, like either software, hardware, whatever, like any tools that have been exciting you? Be it newer or old, like just in general.
I would say that after the combination of one of these old Coxons and the ARP X standing behind me, combined with an MXR distortion pedal, definitely did something to the bass lines. I would say that the stereo image of my mixes and generally what I'm doing in terms of trying to create some harmonics has been improved by some of the eventide. Like the H9 is really, really an exciting tool, especially with the iPad control of the parameters, and doing live recordings, tweaking parameters on the iPad has really been a bliss, man. And to me, it feels like one of the sound goodinizers that I've really been waiting for, or just a little shortcut in your productions. It almost feels like cheating at times. So yeah, those would definitely be two combinations. I would say that this really changed something for me. And a couple of new speakers and refining my guitar also helped the sound and the versatility of what I'm doing, definitely.
Do you, not necessarily for your more recent stuff, where you're having to fly around, but I know that you play guitar, and you started out as a guitarist, right?
Yeah, like it all started with like metal back in the days, and this whole drum and bass breakcore terror was actually just trying to resemble the energy imprint that you would get off listening to really, really heavy shit. And then how can you model that inside of an electronic domain? And that's actually what I've been doing. And then I had a long detour along jazz music, like really training myself with techniques and chromatics and scales and all that stuff. And then I spent a lot of years trying to forget all that shit to get to the tabula rasa, where you actually find that you're just approaching music for the sake of music instead of trying to be technical about it or like driving it in a certain direction, So yeah, I would say that those two things really played a big role in what I'm doing today. Definitely.
Do you ever use live guitar in any of your live shows?
I used to, but the only disadvantage is that the human only has two arms, and that means that there's just a whole rig that you need to put on autopilot, and you basically have some backing tracks running. And I found that really unsatisfying in a lot of ways. That the majority of what you have at an electronic concert is actually the electronic music, and that was exactly what I wanted to change instead of playing advanced guitar licks on top of that. So I changed that quite quickly, actually.
So I've kind of run into a similar situation where I noticed that I do only have two arms, and it really irritates me, I gotta say. Like, a lot of the times I really wish I had more. So I've been doing a lot of things, like I have a few of the machine controllers. We call it machine in America because we're lazy. But so like I'll do things like I'll set up controllers on the floor and be triggering them with my feet. And I don't have a soft step, which maybe I should buy. But so yeah, I'll be hitting things with my feet. But I've noticed things like the leap, leap motion that does the hand. I bought into that and I got one of those things. And I noticed myself coming to the realization that a lot of these controllers that are out there are fairly useless to those of us who are actually performing and trying to get things done, because our hands are already on knobs of our primary controllers. So we can't be busy doing a filter like this while we're tweaking all these other knobs, you know?
You can try. Yeah. It's going to look like the C-sharp, but yeah.
What are some of the things that you would really like to see control-wise happen in the future? Like, what excites you control-wise?
I think like there was a lot of the gesture recognition. I mean, very early on in the university, we started building prototypes for web cameras for color recognition. Like you could control the cutoff with a green glove, and you would have the volume control with a red glove or whatever, these kind of things. But every time I start dreaming about controllerism or what would really liberate you, I only find limitations, because if you would bring something like that on stage and then all of a sudden you have red stage light and everything looks like red to your web camera, then you're in trouble, you know. And the same thing for some of the iPad stuff, like the Lemur really got me excited about doing a whole new type of live set, or I would change things in a different way, but still I only find limitations. Then you have like package loss on the Wi-Fi bandwidth, you don't have a good connection, these kind of things. You have the vulnerability of an iPad, these kind of things. So there's always something getting in my way. So it's a lot easier just doing it really old school, down and dirty, and do it one thing at a time.
It really is a double-edged sword, the iPad, for control, isn't it? I mean, because it's so good, but it can also be so bad.
I mean,
it can be the best thing in the world, and then next thing you know, it can be gone. You know?
Yeah, exactly, man.
So I use one. I oftentimes keep mine like hardwired into my studio. Like I oftentimes don't control it over Wi-Fi, even though when you do like an ad hoc and you have a controlled Wi-Fi, it works pretty well. The latency is pretty low, and
sure.
They've been talking about I guess the new Bluetooth or whatever that they're doing with them.
Exactly. Like media over Bluetooth and iOS 8.5. It's going to be pretty exciting, man.
Yeah, I'm excited by that. But I want deeper control over shutting everything else off and making sure that nothing else happens but that, you know?
Yeah. But I mean, we've been talking about this many times over, like the whole struggle and the fight, and the reason why there's so much hardware standing around in your lab and in my lab is because we want to get away from the computer, and the iPad is actually only a small augmented version of it. So, I mean, like if you talk about exciting machines or nice workflows, then I think the Electron stuff has some pretty interesting ways of dealing with per-step automation and parameter resets, these kind of things, that there's still, you know, good, nice, innovative ideas on how to actually come across nicely on some hardware, and being able to map that out with CV and gate, and then you have a whole new world opening up, you know. So I still think there's a lot to be had from the good old boxes, and I don't swear by the iPad or anything like that. I'm just saying that it's another dimension, but not exactly what I want, but only maybe a small part of what I want to do can be operated from that thing, you know?
Yeah. So, yeah, I have to say, the Electron stuff is to the point where they started out very like niche, and you know it was kind of almost genre specific, at least in the States. There was not many people around here using them, but now I start to see them getting more and more accepted. You start to see I still don't see much, you know, mono machine and things like that out here, but I'm starting to see people perking up to the idea of the rhythm and the Octatrack, which the Octatrack, I have to say, I want it so bad. And the rhythm too. So, and the analog 4. So,
well, there you go, man.
If you're listening, go ahead and send it to me. But yeah, I would say that even to this day, with you know, with things like machine to me feels more like hardware than certain hardware feels like.
Sure.
And I'm kind of really hoping to see more companies take that approach, where they say, let's build a dedicated hardware controller to our software. The problem with that is at which point does it become, okay, I have all this analog gear that is very difficult to emulate in the software world, as far as, you know, getting an analog filter to sound like an analog filter in software. You know, you can get close, but there's something slightly off. But at what point are you willing to take up your desk space, instead of having a Moog, having a dedicated hardware synth that is actually a VST?
Never. Honestly, man, I'm not seeing myself getting away from the computer entirely. Like, everything I own in terms of gear will only be like small pieces of the puzzle. And if I would get a machine to do everything, that would be about the size of a garbage truck, and it wouldn't really fit into my flat. And it would be like the worst ergonomic monster you could ever imagine. I mean, there's so much purpose in the computer that I still need to access. And as you outline, it's really nice with these augmented surfaces like Machina or like a Push to operate certain parts of your software and do certain parts for you. I agree to that, but I don't see myself dodging, mousing around or keyboarding around, because it's simply either taking half a day to do something you could do it 30 minutes if you just bother to sit down and do some cutting on a WAV file or whatever, you know, like, I honestly haven't seen anything like that, but there's some really, really weird and strange Japanese prototypes coming out where you're actually manipulating data just by hand movement. It has like depth perception and these kind of thing, you know, like a living room sort of virtual reality kind of space. I could definitely imagine me throwing away a lot of the shit I have standing around on my table to just be Lawnmower Man in my little virtual reality space, and, you know, blinking around bass drums like that. That would definitely get my socks off, you know.
So
like
you want to go Lawnmower Man, full on virtual reality, be inside of your gear. Like, I can dig that. Like, I'm not opposed to that. I still want to touch some analog gear. Even if emulation was 100% like completely perfect, I still think I would want analog gear. I still think I would want some hardware.
Sure.
Like
Sure.
It's in the same way of if you sample from vinyl, like that scratch that's on your copy of that vinyl isn't on somebody else's copy of vinyl. Like something, it's the little things in life that I take pleasure in sometimes, whether they make sense or not.
Sure, I mean, and there's a reason why all this shit is standing around in your studio and in my studio as well. You know, like you take pleasure in actually knowing your gear, getting into the corners of it. It feels like a part of your body when you're sitting in front of your studios. There's not really a lot of mysteries going on. There's just, you know, sonic marvelment and exploration, and that's what music process should be all about. Then gear, in my eyes, is really secondary. And, you know, everybody has this weird wet fantasy of what music production could be and what it will be like in 20 years. And honestly, I don't fucking care, you know, like the music will come out anyway. You know, if maybe you'll find me in 5 years doing a country album, sitting with a banjo by a river, and I'm gonna be happy with that. You know, you never know, man. So whatever tools you have, whatever purpose you have musically, you're always gonna find a correlation, you know, like there's not a lot of voodoo and mystery to that. So, I mean,
well, I've seen guys go from the highest amount of technical gear to bluegrass. So I've seen that progression happen recently. So you know who I'm talking to. So I've seen it happen. One thing that I'd like to know is, and this is a little bit more personal, but I want you to tell me about the newest piece of kit that you got in the back, the console piece.
The console piece. Oh, that was Ableton colleague that came from, I think he's from New Zealand or something like that. And he had so much custom analog electronic gear with him. And I don't know, you can try to highlight it here.
Yes.
There we go. Yes. It basically looks like something cut out of a Sherman tank. And it's two discrete EQ channel strips that has just a silly gain stage. I mean, you get the best crispy distortion out of these things. So it's like an instant sound goodenizer on drums and on bass, and I'm making drum and bass, so there you go. I mean, it does some filter sweeps that I haven't really heard before, and the distortion is something that I don't get in any plugin or in any other guitar pedal and in any preamp or in any mixer that I've heard before that I've run Red, you know, like it's very unique and special. So that means that it actually fits perfectly in with the rest of the gear, because I have the other types of distortion and the other types of EQing that I need.
So when you purchased that, had you heard it before, or did you just buy it straight out? Because I just want to say, and I'm going to, hopefully before I post this up, I'm going to edit the video a good bit. But what I'll do is I'll post a picture, because you posted a picture on Facebook of the actual units. And I got to say, you could not be a GUI designer. You could not be a plugin designer and make a cooler looking plugin. Like, it has, the paint is rubbed off in all the right places. I mean, it just looks so perfect.
Yep. And it sounds just like it, man. I mean, it's one of the only times where sound and image actually fits really well together. Like, it sounds exactly the way it looks.
Yeah, I saw the picture and I thought to myself, I was like, that almost doesn't look real. It looks like somebody, you know, kind of was like, hey, what would a really cool plugin look like? Okay, we're gonna do this. You know what I mean? We're gonna rough up this EQ to look like it. Nobody has an EQ that looks that roughed up. No, but there it is.
Exactly, man. I mean, it looks like we've been dragging it after us on the street, man. Like, really been giving it the concrete treatment. But yeah, it sounds just as rough as it looks, man. It's I don't know. Maybe I could give you a little sample of it.
If you could, that would be awesome.
Yeah. So let's have a look here. This is some of the bass post tank strip treatment. Not that one. So let's try this one. So does that sound tank strip to you?
That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, that's gonna be on the new EP that I'm currently working on. Like, as soon as we're done here, it's tank strip time for sure.
That's awesome. So, with the outboard gear that you have, like running through, let's say the pedal, the MXR distortion, and with the tank strip that you have there, how are you often running things just out of the box and into your analog gear and then back in, or how are you going about that?
I'm using an RME UFX. It has quite excessive amount of inputs and outputs, so basically everything that I'm using in terms of effects, like the Eventide H9, the MXR, distortion pedals, the tank strips, all sitting on like digital inserts. And using Ableton Live for that, there's a really easy routing options using external audio effects, where you can just quickly set up your inputs and outputs and off you go, you know. So it's actually quite easy working about it like that. I used to be a big Cubase user back in the day, but it's just a total mindfuck getting these digital inserts to work right. And they don't really have a module per se where you just automatically hotwire your input 3 to your output 3, and you have an insert with a filter or distortion pedal sitting there in between. So it's really a breeze working with Ableton Live in that sense for that external audio.
That's actually a really good question that I want to bring up to you, because so now you work with Ableton. So
yeah.
Aside from your working relationship with Ableton, because I've known you a while and I know that you're a big Cubase guy. So aside from the working relationship of Ableton, would you say that you would still be on Ableton regardless?
Yeah, I would. I mean, it's definitely a workflow issue, and overcoming some of the audio quality issues or having to work around that. I mean, Cubase is actually starting to try to assimilate Ableton in a lot of ways. Like, they're doing this musical stretch on their audio files where you're recording, and when you know how to disable that in Ableton Live, and then you actually, I come up with the same production level and the same crisp, clear, muddy, brutal sound anyway. So as said, it's not really about the tools, it's about how you use them, and I don't really find any of these programs standing in my way, and usually they start to complement each other. Like if I'm doing something in Cubase, then I'm usually rewiring into Ableton Live to have my operator, to have all these nice benefits of it. And you see a lot of these cross-platform protocols that are actually working for you. And in worst case, you can always wire up some MIDI sync in between. But yeah, since starting working there, and also since most of the guys that I've been collabing on, like the new merch release, is basically only collabs and remixes. And most of these guys are Ableton Live guys. Yeah. And that is one reason why I've
been... Interesting. It's interesting that you mention it in that scenario right there, where you're saying basically, okay, I'm working with guys that I'm remixing, I'm working with guys, on these other releases, and they're all using Ableton Live. And the reason why I say it's interesting is because oftentimes in forums and on social media and whatnot, you hear people say X is the industry standard. You keep hearing this term thrown around, and we all know what program they talk about. They all say Pro Tools, Pro Tools, Pro Tools. Yeah. But that's really not the case anymore these days, because a lot of the times it's the producers that are doing a lot of the engineering job that used to be in the main studio on Pro Tools. So nowadays, those producers and whatever tool they pick is the industry standard, which can be just about anything these days.
Sure, but I mean, for everybody, it's a convenience question. I think if I was producing metal, then I would definitely be on Pro Tools, because that's
it's a tape machine.
The industry standard in that world. But for the electronic musician or electronic-based production, like Ableton Live is really the majority, or Cubase in that sense. But honestly, the task of trying to collect all the audio files and all the stuff you need to actually send a project from A to B and have it translate perfectly is really a pain in the ass with Cubase. And when you know this, collect all and save with Ableton Live, then there's absolutely no turning back. I mean, you always have a quality loss, like rendering out stems and these kind of things, and you know this, like it always deteriorates every time you start doing stem bounces, these kind of things. And this is what I want to try to avoid, bouncing projects in between Cubase and Ableton Live and having it cut up, exported one more time, sent back. Then you really start to lose a lot of dynamics. So rather just use the same application, and you can basically do the same thing in both hosts. So I don't really see any religious or militant reason not to just use the tool everybody else is using, as long as it's not getting in my way or getting in my face. So I don't really see any reason why not.
So when you're dealing with the majority of these, are you staying primarily in arrange mode, or are you jumping between the two modes, or?
I'm very rarely in session, admittedly. Like session is really the live mode for me. I mean that's what I'm doing live. Like just playing with my little Legos in session mode. But producing tracks is definitely arrangement. There's no question. I mean, you can scratch out some ideas, and the push is really nice for assisting you in idea creation in session mode. But it's all arrangement for me, man. Seriously.
Yeah, and that's I primarily use. So for the vast majority of production work, I'll start with machine standalone. And then I'll move, if it's going to be a track that's actually going to be finalized and actually used for something, then I'll move into Studio One, and then I'll start playing with Studio One, which I like that a lot. I admittedly, I play with Ableton. I like Ableton, but I don't. It hasn't clicked with me yet. I feel like for Ableton. For everybody that I know that uses Ableton, there's a clicking moment where it all just kind of falls into place for them. And for me, it just hasn't quite hit that moment yet. So, and the thing that used to keep me from even caring about that was it used to have a lower audio fidelity. But now that's been completely rectified, and now it sounds as good as everything else. And I have no problems with that. With you coming from knowing Machine so well, knowing Cubase so well, and then transferring into using Ableton as much as you are, did you find it to be a big learning curve, or did you just kind of take to it like a duck to water?
Not at all. I mean, Ableton has been in my life since version 4, so it's not like a completely new thing to me. It's just been a matter of preference that tracking audio has been more comfortable for me in the old Cubase versions. But honestly, the difference between hosts, be it like FL Studio, be it Cubase, be it Pro Tools, Logic, Ableton, is really almost zero. So it all boils down to like personal preference and what you can work with. It's basically it's all called the same, like the same features are available. I mean, we're talking about massive feature monsters by now. You know, like every host started out with a feature set of maybe 2,000 things you could do inside that application, and by now we're counting, I don't know, 14,000 features in your average host, you know, and it's all assimilated. Everybody took ideas from each other within the industry and incorporated that into their own product. But I find these two hosts actually underlining or supporting my workflows a lot better, all depending on what I'm doing. And it's very transparent. And I found the transparency coming really quickly with both Cubase and with Ableton Live, that it doesn't really make a difference, you know, like audio quality wise, it's on the same benchmark. The production pace, like you're done within a couple of days with a track, it's all the same. So I don't really have any religious conviction that this is better than that. I'm just finding that Ableton Live is a lot faster for me, and there's some audio routing things that are a lot easier with all the outboard that I have. I found some of the warping features really comfortable to work with, instead of having to goof around with Cubase, like wave editing, these kind of thing. I found some controller workflows a lot easier in Ableton Live, like recording, automating ESTs and this kind of thing, where I find the display and the visual feedback of what I actually did is a lot worse in Cubase these days. Mm-hmm. So it's about working really fast, working efficient, and working towards a goal that I find, you know, Ableton being the best use for that. And I'm not saying that only because of work purpose. Seriously, it's been a really good learning curve being in this environment of people that I mentioned before, like some of the drum and bass heads down here in Berlin that have showed me a couple of things where you burn your bridges and you can't really go back after that, you know.
Well, you're also available online, like in the forum. So like the Ableton Live forum, you're available online there, right?
Only in the test.
Do you follow any of that stuff? Like as far as what other people are saying?
Sure. I mean, everybody's quite interested in what the feedback is with the product, and that is also one of the reasons why I really like working in that company, that there's really a common interest in actually getting the feedback, and they're very open and receptive towards these things, and they're really listening to the users in a lot of ways. So
switching gears just a little bit, I want to talk about sound and what you prefer to use for not tracking but actual sound. Mm-hmm. When you go to make a track, what is some of the first things that you reach for to come up with? Let's start with the bass. We'll start with the bass and then we'll move to the drums. But so when you want to make a bass sound, what is like the first thing that you instinctively want to just grab?
I just go directly over to my ARP and pitch it down a few octaves and put a synthesizer on it. And then I adjust my filters and a few LFOs to get the pitch right and the wobble in there. And whenever I have my bass face on without thinking about it, I sit down and track it.
So the ARP, you have the ARP Axe, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Do you have any issues with it functionally? Or is it like, even though it's old and, you know, I'm simply asking as a gearhead, you ever have any issues with your gear functionality wise for how old it is?
So what you need to know is that the cork, the tunings are not working at all. I bought it for like 50 euros because it was defect. So I have to force myself to use the ears a lot to actually get the two oscillators in tune. And that is a nice challenge every time. I see everything as a nice problem to have. So, and it also creates a lot of happy accidents. You know this, man. You know this, man. Like when you lean one oscillator just on the other one, and then you start to get these tone vibrations. That is when that festival rig is just starting to go. You know, that's exactly where the magic happens. So I don't see it as problems. I see it more as creative potential, that you have some malfunctions in your gear, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that you've got, and this is me kind of being a synth nerd just a little bit, but I'm pretty sure you've got what, the chord delta?
What?
Which chord? The other chord that you have, is that a delta?
No, it's a DV800.
Okay, I'm wrong then. So you've got a DBA, and that thing's got a lot of quirks in it as well, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, none of it is really working as specified in the manual. So it's like having two retired old men fighting over the remote control, sitting in the same rack at times. I mean, they really do have a lot of personality, and that's exactly why I have it. You know, like something that you can't program into an application. You know, I still believe in happy accidents. I still believe in glitch and randomness, and this is what this mentality also brought to me. You know, like that there has to be some surprises in there.
As a guitarist, right? As somebody who I know, really gets down on some serious metal. I gotta ask, moving from guitar to synthesizer in that way, and you're using these ruckus synthesizers that kind of go crazy. Do you find that you gravitate more to older synths that have those quirks, or do you still like the newer analog stuff that's maybe a little bit more restrained?
I mean, there's Slim Fatty and a Mini Brute in the rack as well. So I think the answer is yes and yes. The magic happens when you start to combine new and old, and also slap a VST as a third layer on top of that. So drum and bass music, you usually have three infamous layers of your bass. You have the sub, you have the mids, and you have the highs. And then you have a synthesizer for each purpose, basically. So combining all of that into one sound is by far the force majeure. And both of us also field recording freaks. And then when you had this big truck standing here in the street and it's just, creating the, then you layer that with your synthesizers and voila, you have a quite magic bass sound all of a sudden.
Absolutely. And that's a good point to bring up. So, I myself am a huge fan of field recording and getting outside with microphones and recording whatever I can. Anything that sounds mildly like, hey, what's that with your regular ears with a microphone on it sounds 100 times cooler, right?
Yeah.
So, what are some things that you've gone out and just recorded and had fun with?
So recently, coming back to the guitar, I actually unmounted one of my humbuckers of the guitar, like the double coil pickup, and wired it into the inputs of my field recorders. And then I started recording electrical fields. That means that your shaver will sound pretty fucking weird, hovering that humbucker over it.
Just so everybody knows, this is the look of jealousy, because I have not done this.
Well, there you go, man. Now you know what your weekend is all about. No, but that is something that got me quite interested in the world again, like going out and recording electrical field. And also, the bridge microphone of violins, like these little piezo contacts, where you can actually just drag it along the floor or do scrapes or squeeze it in between a pair of pliers and something like that. There's always like something really interesting coming out of what you can't really hear with your normal ear, but would need some sort of amplification or alteration or different, a different spectre what you're recording. It feels like sounds from a parallel dimension coming into your field recorder in that sense. So next project is probably hydrophones. Like
yes, we will talk after this show. I've been working on special hydrophones. Yeah, we'll have a special conversation about that. I've got something that you will like. I might have to send you something.
Nice. I'm looking forward to that. And the same thing for binaural, like in-ear recording microphones. Then you get all sorts of weird spaces coming out of that. Like when you actually perceive it as you hear it with your natural ears, that's really interesting as well. But by far, I think the world is really made out of beautiful music, and the main thing is that you have to open yourself towards that a power station hum could be a part of a bass line and actually start to think about that. So I think the main challenge is actually a mental bridge that you have to cross. But then when you're on the other side of that, then you also know that the bridges are burned, that all of a sudden the world turns into, a beautiful symphony of destruction, like there's all kinds of good stuff to go out there and record.
Yeah, I have to say, like you said, the dystopia pack that I did had a lot of electrical hums, and I used high voltage. And later on, when I start playing with like modular synthesizers and stuff, it's like it's all voltage going through there, and it's like you might not hear it with your ears, but you amplify it and then you can hear it. And
you should definitely try to drag a humbucker over your modular system and see how that sounds.
You know that I'm about to. Like I've got three other guitars over here right now that are just waiting for me to break open. Yeah. None of the ones on the walls though. They stay beautiful.
But also recently something. Just a little discovery, also coming back to guitar technology, like a lot of the spring reverbs you have setting in amplifiers. Do you know what an EBO is? It's a very strong...
Yeah. It's a little, for people that don't know, the EBO, it sends out a little electrical wave, so it will vibrate a piece of metal. And you can get them at like Guitar Center or Zounds or Musicians Friend, any place that sells guitar stuff, and it's basically... It replaces a plectrum or a pick.
Yep, exactly. So coming back to the spring reverb, try to put an EBO on a spring reverb. That would be like a creative advice, and you would get some.
Can I comment?
Well, obviously.
Rip a spring reverb right out of a Hammond organ.
Nice.
If you go to any flea market and you find like an old organ or something, tell the guy you're his friend and then steal his reverb tank.
Exactly, man. And you stick an EBO on that thing, and you would have, I don't know, big metal-shaped whales coming out of your speakers all of a sudden. Like
I have not done that yet. I haven't done that with the EBO yet, and that's a really good point, because I've been doing lots of things with taking thread and rubbing thread across it.
Sure.
And what was it? Tooth floss. So I took tooth floss and I just kind of dragged slowly tooth floss across it. And also, so with a spring tank, you've got the RCA outputs on it, so that, and then you can amplify that. And another thing that you can do with it is you can place a contact microphone, a piezo mic, like you were talking about earlier, squeezing and everything. You can take a piezo mic and hook that to the tank itself, and then get the whole vibration of the tank along with it. It's something I've been doing recently. So yeah, that's a great one.
Well, I mean, it's not only the world that is made out of beautiful sound. Like you always found like new weird experiments, or find yourself doing really weird shit in the studio where you have your friends coming in the door and almost, maybe you should go to an asylum or something, call a doctor and get your head checked, like really in weird situations. But yeah, it's all experiments with electronics and the stuff that we have around us. There's always something new to discover,
You're not normal people, sir.
I found that out a long time ago.
I've had a lot of parties at my house and in my studio and whatnot. And what I'll do is I'll always leave recorders running, and just picking up people's conversation, because when people get a little bit crazy, very weird conversations start up, and and then of
good
course,
for blackmail later on as well.
And let me just say this now: anyone who goes to a party that's in a recording studio, just know anything you say is fair game. You know what I mean? It's fair. Like it's fair game. Okay,
exactly.
So just because I recorded what you said, don't get mad at me. You're the one who said it in a recording studio.
Exactly.
So that's how I look at it. But
yeah, and it's really good for blackmail later on. Like it's easy money at times.
Sure. So I want to ask you. I want to ask you about a project that you did recently. So your previous album that you had released, you had done on vinyl as well, and you sent it out and had it mastered. I believe you had it mastered twice, right? Like for digital and for vinyl, or how did that work?
It's the same. It was from Dub Plates and Mastering here in Berlin, and the guy Lupo mastering the album is really knowing and cunning about format limitations, that you can't get away with bass and stereo on vinyl, but you can get away with bass and stereo on MP3s. So basically he did two mastering versions, like a digital and a vinyl master, and that's quite normal in that sense, that you have to adjust to whatever medium you're releasing on. So it's quite normal actually that you have several versions of the mastering, that you have both digital and for vinyl as well.
Which version do you prefer to listen to?
I always prefer vinyl. I mean, I'm still like a total vinyl man, and it's more because the sounds that I'm making, and you also know this when you pull in a lot of synthesis and field recording, you have a lot of these high frequencies that can be quite harsh on the ear. I know that Bob Cat has a very special way of actually sampling down these things and turning down the treble for exactly that reason, that the pleasure of actually listening to it will not tire the ear over a long time. And I found many electronic releases on vinyl doing exactly that, that you have a normal sampling down just because it's on a different medium, because you're able to deliver full spectrum on both wave and on CD that can get quite hot on the ear if you're doing quite intense music.
Let me ask you a question, and this is a personal opinion question, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So when it was mastered to vinyl, okay, did you get a digital copy of the vinyl master?
No, you get a test pressing. Like,
okay. So what I'm wondering is this, and this is just a question out of curiosity. If you had the digital copy of the vinyl master with the EQ tweaks, with everything done the way that it should be for vinyl,
mm-hmm.
How would you feel about that versus the actual line?
I mean, it's actually what I did when I sent it around to my friends. I recorded the vinyl to a wave and then sent it around, because I would like my favorite friends to have the same listening experience that I had. But I also understand that some guys would be DJing this in a club where automatically would sound a lot more muffled. So I see the purpose for both, but my preference would still be the vinyl sound for that reason, because it's warmer, it's sampled down.
So you would say in a home listening environment, in a home listening environment, you want to hear the vinyl version of it. But in a club setting, you would rather the digital version, because you're dealing with limitations of a live PA.
Definitely. And I mean, for that reason exactly, I mean, there's a justification to do both, and that's also why it exists, that there's both a vinyl and some MP3s or waves or Flux, like it has different purposes. And the same thing for listening to your stuff being played out on the radio. Then when they play the vinyl, then you often hear that this sampling down can be an issue if it's within the mix, that the neighboring tracks will sound a lot more bright and a lot more out there and with a lot higher RMS that the DJ might not take into account. So I still see a justification of having the digital format with a -2 RMS mastering,
So one other question about that. When you're DJing out, if you're just out doing shows, are you ever playing any of your tracks that are completed and just kind of laid out, or are you always doing strictly, Ableton Live session view, kind of tweaking and triggering on the fly?
I stopped DJing drum and bass many years ago. Like that was around 2002, and when people started DJing on Pioneer CD DJs, then I stopped DJing completely, and I wanted to do something else. And that's also why I'm playing live sets and not DJing. And the only challenge of playing a live set is that you have to pull it up sound-wise to actually sound like mastered, finished tracks, and also give the impression that it is actually something that is driven with a creative mind and these kind of things that you normally have in a production scenario. So this was by far the biggest challenge of finding out how you're actually going to play a live set and give that impression that it's actually pre-produced or finished tracks in that sense, although you're actually standing there playing with Legos and improvising a live set, you know.
So the most recent release that's already been out, that's out there for the world to get. Where can they pick that up at?
There's the Ad Nauseam releases, which is at adnauseam.net. There's a web shop. And the release you mentioned, the Aerodynamic, was on Creative Commons, so people can buy the vinyl and support my stuff. But it's also a free download from the website urlaut.com, where you can get the MP3s and the waves for free, actually.
And we'll put that stuff in the link in the video as well, so that you can all just grab that. Which you got to grab it like probably 4 or 5 times because your pocketbook allows it, your wallet allows it. So just go ahead and keep buying. So the release that you're working on now that's about to come out, can you tell me a little bit about that?
It's been quite a journey. It's very versatile in sound. Like this, the mastering engineer got back to me and saying that this was like mastering a compilation from a lot of different acts, and it includes basically every artist that I found really interesting to work with, and also style-wise trying to cover as much ground because I love all kinds of music, and that is represented on that album, meaning that it goes from hip-hop to ambient to breakcore. There's a lot of ground being covered there, and it's featuring artists like yourself, Joey Juggernauts, Carsten Flum, Koo, too many names to mention. I think it's counting something like eight or nine different artists that I've been collaborating with on that one release. So I'm quite proud that it came together under the same roof, and it's still in my ears, and to the people that I played it to, a great listening experience that is tied together with them.
So you say that it covers a wide spectrum of different sounds on one album, which that's not typical, you know. No. Especially now when we say a wide range of sounds, we're not talking about like a Foo Fighters record where their quote-unquote wide range of sounds is all in one genre. We're talking about spanning entire genres of sound.
I think it comes from the fascination of the very creative albums coming out in the start of the 2000s, where you had more like a concept album instead of a genre deterministic album, you know, like you try to show people more than what you can do within one specific genre, you know, like, and when you do a release like that, and especially on a label like Ad Nauseam, there's the headroom and space to still do these things and still tell a story with your album instead of tell about how you can make drum and bass music or breakcore music. Like it covers a lot more ground in that sense, and it's a lot more freedom in terms of like creativity freedom, what you allow yourself to do in the studio, and that has been very stimulating, not only collaborating with others and trying to include them as much in this explorative creative process, but also just sitting back and actually listening to it as a whole, that it's really, I don't know, sort of an adventure in my eyes and ears.
So being with that label, who else on that label has been really inspiring?
I think basically everybody. I mean, I've been buying vinyls off that label. It's quite old. It's been around for like 13 years and has always been putting out left field music that in one way or another caught my ear. And he doesn't really limit himself to one certain style or genre. Like you hear breakcore and ambient albums coming out from Ad Nauseam left and right, you know. So there's always been something interesting there for me to listen to, and I'm really proud and honored to be a part of that, you know, in a lot of ways.
I'll say that now you can also follow Ad Nauseam on SoundCloud as well, correct? So, which I would highly recommend, because I've been watching it, and as someone in the States, you're not, unless you know like a group of people that are deeply entrenched in it, you don't see that type of music nearly as much. But once you dive in a little bit, if you get to the right labels like Ad Nauseam, you start to see like, because they're so open creatively to all these different genres, and not just genres, but to all these different artists and how they interpret different things. I've noticed that there's a lot of really great music that they're just kind of delving out, and it's not. It reminds me, like you had talked about how you went from metal guitar to jazz. It reminds me a lot of Blue Note in the way that it's a very so it's kind of like Blue Note, but for electronic music. It's like just people looking for really cool, innovative, good music that challenges the ear, that makes you interested, and then puts it out, regardless of whether it's what's popular at the time. It puts it out and says, "Hey, look, this is something you should be taking notice of."
Exactly. And like you also know this as a great digger, that sometimes you would really look in a certain forum like Dogs on Acid for good drum and bass music. You would go elsewhere and try to dig out your IDM releases, but this has always been like a place where good music would just come out of, regardless of genre, and it saves you a lot of the searching work. And I found some of the European labels actually doing that they don't really limit themselves to a certain type of genre, and I really do respect that they just go by the quality gate, good music, and that's it, man. That there's always something interesting to dive into. So
now, most of the more recent tour stuff that you're doing, are you doing with other Ad Nauseam artists, or are you doing how is that going?
I mean, the April tour to France was almost exclusively Ad Nauseam artists playing there, but also, I mean, it's the epicenter of basically all my activities. All the shows are coming out of that label. So it's not really that we hold hands and we go out and play together, but we usually end up playing in the same places anyway, because it's very genre-specific music that we're doing. I mean, in that sense, hard drum and bass, and there's not really a lot of people doing interesting hard drum and bass, so we always end up playing the same shows anyway. I mean, the scene is not that big anymore.
Sure. So, going forward, from this point forward, let me just ask you, in dealing with a niche scene that is very much centered on, okay, you have a focused group of people, do you look forward to trying to spread that message out and widen the scene as much as possible, or are you kind of more the type of person that wants to stay with these focused shows and keep it as tight as possible?
I think every rule is meant to be broken. I think every genre is only established to be smashed. I think this is the only way that music can move forward, so I try very hard not to build any walls around my creative freedom or limit myself in any ways. So maybe that's an answer, that this is only what I feel like doing right now. Maybe I'll play country next year. I don't really know where the roads take me, So I mean, it's music is freedom in a lot of ways, and when you're not really relying on it in that sense, in terms of income, then you don't have to be concerned about, making box office hits or doing the A-class production that you can sell out for next week, because you have to live up with these things. So in that sense, I experience myself having absolute creative freedom to do whatever I like, and it would be really a shame not exploiting that, both in studio work and also in terms of like live workflows.
Yeah, well, I will say, and you kind of referenced it earlier, and I'm not going to harp on it at all, because I'm not that guy. But so you did some remixes of tracks that I had originally produced, which you took my beautiful beats and destroyed. So the MC, Joey Juggernaut, still sounds fantastic as he always does. But you took my beautiful beats and completely obliterated it into another realm. Which I gotta say, after I listened to it, I was a little bit jealous about.
I open the door, scoping your whores, hoping for more. You know my skills is doper than yours. The ancient mummy from the golden age, holding rage. I ain't blow up, and you ain't gonna neither. Now take a breather. I study scripts of the Grim Reaper and the Gatekeeper, deleting some Facebook messages from a fake diva, and I ain't hating either. You catch the Juggernaut spraying graffiti on the side of the Xavier School. Always willing to reprimand the ill behavior of fools. This is beef with Salmonella, a prince slamming Cinderella. We sampling the beats and jamming in the cellar, jamming in the cellar.
This ain't the plane or that same. This is head on collisions, hope you change lanes. To all you lames and you plain James and brainwash feeders, when I step in, take a breather.
So that's a perfect example of you taking something and kind of, sideswiping these genres and not caring about what happens with the genres. But is there any time that you maybe work on a project or work with an artist and you think maybe I can't do that?
Yeah, every day. That's a challenge we pose on ourselves. What we did in our collaboration was, hip hop has been a very big part of me during my youth. It's what I've been listening to growing up on, East Coast, and I found some of the instrumentals really amazing in terms of production, and I know that I could never do something as simple and as direct and on the point as the Take a Breather instrumental, so instead of making an classical remix where I just put a little effects on the voice and these kind of things, then I thought, okay, let me filter this through how I thought hip hop should sound when I was a young boy. The goal of the music is always trying to make what is not there. Manufacture the piece that you find missing in the musical world as you see it, as in the musical spectrum, and then it can be either good and bad, and I'm really happy that you like it instead of like, what the fuck is this, man? It could have gone bad really quickly, man.
Let me just say a couple of things. And this is, I don't want to, so I'm just going to say this stuff and just get it out there quickly because I don't want to take over any part of the interview. But I will say this, anytime anybody calls a Flux beat simple, you should probably listen to that guy, okay? You should probably take notice to what that guy's doing, okay? Mm-hmm. Because if anybody knows my music, when he says simple, you need to pay attention because that's great. Now, I will say for that particular album, yes, you're absolutely right. The hip-hop side of it, it needed to stay simple. Mm-hmm. But what I found interesting about the remix that you did was that although, the initial beat I tried to keep as simple and as straightforward and as on point as possible, when you remixed it, you kept certain aspects of it, but you brought forth this kind of bubbly, glitchy, like punch you in the facey kind of way. And I want to know, where does all this come from? Like when you start to play with the drums, for instance, where are you deriving this sort of instance? Because your drums on this remix are 180 degrees the opposite direction of what I'm doing. And a lot of people say 360 degrees the wrong direction, and they're completely wrong because that's the same freaking direction. Let's just say 180 degrees, wrong direction. This dude took what I did, which was a straightforward boom bap hip hop, and changed it into what can only be described as an orgasmic Armageddon. Right? So I want to know where that stems from. Like, how do you...
No, first off, like saying simple is not meaning like simple music in that sense, but it's more
trying simple to... as in mentality, as in I'm just slow.
limit your creativity to something like a hook line, like something that really works for the vocal and for the track as such. But what I did with the drums, for instance, was basically just my sounds from the electronic world, but the same kind of tracking process where I would finger drum container sounds and heavily synthesized snare drums and this kind of thing. What I actually find missing in hip hop at times, because it's very limited to a breakbeat sound that I really like this whole Stones Throw kind of way of production. Like I really love a lot of the Madlib stuff, and like this instrumental also reminded me of a lot of these things. Like this is where my heart beats, and this is the hip hop that I know. But I was never capable of doing something like that, so I had to do something else. So I kept the process of actually playing as much of it with my hands instead of like sequencing, quantizing, making it very straight, correct German electronica, then it wouldn't have the heart and the soul. And
just to clarify,
you're
Danish. Let's give a shout out to the Danes.
Why?
But what I wanted to ask you about is a part of your sound that, to me at least, as a listener, that I get really intrigued by is you have these little, like your drops are fantastically huge, okay? Your drop, and everybody talks about the drops, but I'm not talking about the drops. What I want to know about is in between the drops, you had these little clicks and these bubbly type sounds. And I want you to describe how you come about those types of sounds.
I mean, most of it is on one side happy accidents, and on another side.
Are you just resampling happy accidents, or how is that? How are you getting that, like these bubbly sounds, to a point where you can reuse them?
I mean, it's source and carrier, most of it. I mean, if you take something as simple as raindrops of a field recorder and run it through a vocoder and then extract the MIDI from that to another synthesizer, then you're actually pretty close to what the process of that remix was.
Do you realize how deep what you just said in such a simplistic term is to most people?
Well, I mean, you also know that you come across these things within 30 minutes when you're just, cruising in your studio and you plug your cables a little different, and all of a sudden the cat is on fire and the walls are coming down. This is what you strive for in electronic, to try to surprise yourself and also the listener to a certain extent. So I think this was a lot of like my IDM past, actually driving those little, gnarly details or fills or sense of detail in that production.
Now I will say that, so I'm hopefully not going to be lazy, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to edit this video a little bit, right? So I've already added, hopefully, some examples of your bubbly, crazy, clicky, interesting noises, right? Now the way that you use them is actually useful. And the reason why I say it the way I say it is because before we started recording this podcast, we were talking about modular gear and how a lot of the times people will use modular gear, and then all you'll hear, you'll have $6,000 worth of gear, and then all you'll hear is insect music or clicks and chirps.
Yep.
Now, a lot of the times you're doing these interesting clicks and chirps, but you're making them musical. So what I want to ask is, how is it that you're able to restrain yourself? You are clearly capable of going far beyond what the average listener is into. You're clearly capable of diving far deeper than what is acceptable by an average listener. But a lot of the times, and even though you're in a niche music genre, which is not mass media by any means, you're still able to make something musical and something fun to listen to out of. How do you restrain yourself?
I think it's actually only two very, very simple rules. Like, one rule is pitch, Like I use a lot of times actually getting the sound to be harmonic correlate. That means that there would be a certain type of bass harmony in it, and then everything kind of follows it. Like it doesn't really matter if I'm throwing glass around, glass has a tone. You pitch the glass into fitting whatever bass line or whatever drums are running. The drums also need to be in pitch with the bass line. I mean, that is one very simple rule that is sitting down here and always working for me. It doesn't really matter if I'm trying to drive it as disharmonic as possible. It will always end up in some sort of a harmony or pitch. Like it can be dissonant and these kind of things. That is one rule. And the other rule is time. Like there's pitch and there's time. That everything has, you know, like the good old Mickey Mouse cartoons that you had where the trees were dancing in the background sort of thing.
That was
like
LSD.
It's all in my head. No, but that everything needs to be in time. The whole background needs to be grooving with Mickey Mouse when he's being chased by the villains in the cartoon. So this is another thing that rhythm is very important for these things, that it matters a lot where you put this sound in and how it will fit together with all the other sound, that there's two placements in the access, time and pitch. That's the only operational parameters I have for actually cramming all that shit into one tune, basically.
So, would you say that when you're doing your music, which again, I'm going to reiterate, is a niche music, if you're, let's say you're working at your day job, right? Do you ever find that comes into conflict? Like, let's say you're working at 192 beats per minute, and you say, "This is where I'm working."
Mm.
Does that ever and you find a problem, let's say, at 192 beats per minute, which most people will never reach that fast of a tempo. Do you ever reach a situation where you say, okay, this is a problem because I'm working at such a high tempo, and people are just like, well, nobody ever reaches that tempo.
I mean, you also know this, that when you run into problems like that, then like the problem you just mentioned, then you only take the half of 192 and then you work in double time. Like then you just start to do MIDI stretching and these kind of things. So this is also like a part of the whole production process. Like whenever you run into some problems, then the challenge is to overcome them somehow, and there's always a solution. You know, like there's a nice saying that there are no problems, there are only challenges, and that's really true in the terms of electronic production. You know, like there's only as many challenges as you want to pose on yourself, and there's only as many mountains as you want to climb by the strength of your own back in that sense. So I don't find many technical limitations in that sense. Like that was a long time ago that I had these problems, you know. Like it comes after a certain amount of years and a certain amount of experience, when you know your gear, you know your stuff, you know where you can go, you know where you can't go, you know where the problem domains are, you know where the safe areas are. And then you try to balance challenge and technical challenge into actually making something that is listenable for a user on the other side of the speakers. Though I must say that when I'm producing music, I am not thinking about the user. I am still trying to make, I mean, I have an image what exists in the world in terms of music, metal, rap, classic, ambient, and then I try to find the little pieces that I find missing, or something that is unheard, or something that is unseen, you know. Like still trying to give myself a thrill in listening to the music that I'm doing. That's basically what I'm trying to do.
So I wanna start to close out the session, and I want to just say a couple of things. One, I think that a lot of people need to thank who's behind the scenes on their side. Okay, that needs to happen. Whether I'll go into deeper detail on that later remains to be seen. But I will say that this guy has your best interests at heart, because understand that the niche music that takes electronic music to its breaking point is what is needed in order to make the music for the people who just want to breeze through it better. Like, would you agree with that?
I'm totally with you on that. I mean, all of us are adrenaline junkies, being skaters, and in a lot of senses, we're still thrill seekers in that sense. You know, like I'm looking for the rush in music, and I wanted to do something to me instead of being a nice furniture being in the corner of the living room. You know, like as you said, there's so many records out there that you could just put on and completely ignore, and that is not what I'm trying to do, and that's not what I'm interested in listening to. And you can with that.
So what I want to say is, in closing, one, Monolog, Mads Lindgren, is somebody you should pay attention to, because one, whether you're a part of that music scene or not, he's always doing something interesting. Like, if you really listen to it, it will, like, I challenge anyone who's not a part of that music scene to try to recreate one of his tracks. You can't do it. I've tried. I'm a nerd, and I've tried, and you're not doing it. You might get almost close, but you'll get almost close enough to where your mom will tell you that you're special. It's not going to happen. So,
I'll take that. It's a huge compliment, man.
What I will say is that when it comes down to it, you really need to know that there are genres that do things in a similar way, yet harder than what you do. Okay? And when that happens, you need to support those genres because they'll make what you do better. Okay? And I'm saying this to all the hip-hop, to all the EDM, to everybody. Like, and that's myself included, because I don't do what you do, okay? But I will tell you that when I hear what you do, I think to myself, holy shit, how did he do that? Like, I've heard things that have been done, and they hurt my head. So that's something that people need to be aware of. That what hurts your head is making your gear better. So you need to support that. So I hope more people visit Subland. I hope more people pick up Monolog records. I hope more people visit these festivals, which I hope to attend in the near future. I'm very much hoping to visit Berlin in the near future.
Man, that would be good.
Yeah. I'm going to hit some of those skate parks and probably hurt myself too. So you look to see me on the injured reserve list for skateboarding as well.
Well, we can sit here, quibble, and make sounds, you know that, man.
I'll at least record the sound of my bones breaking.
I thought you did that already.
Seriously, though, that's going to be a premium expansion pack, and you're going to have to pay extra for it. So I just want to say thank you to Mads Lindgren, Monolog. Amazing musician, amazing content producer, amazing quality assurance engineer, amazing community activist. And do you have any last words before I kill the feed and you are gone forever? Well, at least until they see your next release.
Well, only like thank you for the attention, and thanks for listening to me ramble about this, you know, like, and seriously, cheers for picking up on my silly sounds, man. Like, it's highly appreciated.
This is Flux of fluxwithit.com with Monolog, Mads Lindgren, and I highly recommend you go check out everything that you can get your hands on. Peace.